Good evening, everyone, and welcome. We are so honored to have you here today for Pride in Everybody Queer and Voices of Disabilities Leading Change. My name is Malik Gooch, and I'm with the Colorado Cross Disability Coalition, or CCDC for short, as their communications coordinator. CCDC is Colorado's largest and oldest disability led organization committed to ensuring that people with all types of disabilities have equal rights and opportunities. Our work is rooted in advocacy, leadership, and community power, centering disabled voices in every space where decisions are made. Today's event is part of our Unstoppable Together campaign, an initiative dedicated to celebrating the power and leadership of people of color and those living at the intersections thriving with disabilities. Unstoppable Together brings us conversations, storytelling, community, and action that moves us closer to truer disability justice. As we hear from our incredible panelists today, we invite you to listen with open hearts, reflect on the complexity of our communities, and think about how we can rise together steadfast and strong. So, a few housekeeping notes that I want to share before we dive in. We have ASL interpretation, live captioning, and as mentioned before by Hilda, Spanish translation available if you need any of those languages or need any interpretation. We'll have time for audience questions towards the end, which is when we'll re-enable the chat to take any questions, and we'll let you know when that is available. With that, I want to start and begin by introducing our great panelists. If you guys would not mind introducing yourselves when I call your name. The order I call your name will also be the speaking order for questions later tonight. I would also like you to just introduce yourselves, name, pronouns, titles if applicable, and how you are involved with the LGBTQIA plus community. So can we please start with Paige?
Sure. Thank you, Malik. My name is Payge Nilsestuen. I use they, them pronouns. I am a published author, a restorative justice practitioner, and a community member located in the Denver metro area, or Cheyenne, Ute, and Arapaho lands, technically. And I identify as a genderqueer, lesbian, transmasculine person. Was that sufficient?
That's great, thank you, Paige. Next is Jim.
Hi, my name's Jem Moore. I use she, they pronouns. I am a black trans femme wearing glasses and with a couple of piercings on my nose and on my eyebrow, just as a visual description. I work as the statewide youth organizer for the California Foundation for Independent Living Centers here in Sacramento. Um, and I'm pretty heavily involved in the queer scene here in California. I've got lots of friends, lots of queer family that I love to spend time with and advocate with. Yeah.
Thank you, Jim. And specifically, the reason why I brought up the titles, Dr. Kim, I made sure to respect this before we came in, honestly. I know how hard it is to earn that as a title. So, Dr. Kim, if you would.
Hi everyone, it's so great to be with you all today. My voice is a little rough, so let me know if you have trouble understanding me. My name is Dr. Kimberly Jackson, she, her pronouns. I am a white woman in her 40s wearing purple rimmed glasses, a maroon shirt, and a blue and white neck brace with a shaved head with brown hair. I've been a board member with the Colorado Cross Disability Coalition since 2014, I think, for a while now. I also used to practice family medicine down in Pueblo, and moved up this way as I started having significant health issues, and multiple disabilities as a result of that. I've previously also done work in trans spaces. I identify as queer, genderqueer, trans feminine, uh, asexual, and I guess as a doctor, sure, why not? But again, it's so great to be with you all today, and I'm really excited for this panel.
Thank you. And last but not least, Maria.
Hi, everyone. I'm Maria. I am CCGC's data person. I'm the director of data analysis. I am a Latin woman, ethnically ambiguous looking with glasses. Um, I'm also a mom to two neurodivergent kids. I'm a card carrying lesbian, very garden variety, but I that's pretty much all there is to me. I have worked quite a bit in immigration spaces and with Latinx communities. And yeah, that's where we're at. I do have my son here next to me playing Roblox. So if you hear some very loud typing, that's we're just in a very intense place right now. So yeah, thank you for having me.
All right, and that is great. Thank you all for being with us. One last thing I want to mention before we get into questioning. We typically try to keep responses for questions to 3 minutes per panelist. So if we start approaching it, I will give you a 1 minute warning. Please, I'm not trying to rush you all. We want to hear your stories, but we do have such limited time, and especially with four, we will need to keep that in mind. But thank you again for everyone being here. And I'm actually going to lead into the first question, which is, what does pride mean to you as a person who is LGBTQIA plus and living with a disability? How have these intersecting identities shaped the way you experience and engage with the world? And we are going to start with Paige.
Thank you. I'll do my visual description. Sorry, I didn't do that before. I'm a white person with brown hair and who's wearing a black flannel long sleeve shirt with a collar. So to answer the question, I think pride to me means just being neutral about both the queerness, the transness, and the disabilities. Not assigning morals, not viewing it as like good or bad or something to overcome or something to wallow in. I'm not. I don't personally interpret any experiences through the lens of like religion or like God testing me or anything like that. So it's all pretty neutral. It is what it is. Um, and as far as navigating the world, there are a lot of systems at play that impact virtually everything. Um, I would say that my biggest struggle is the built environment, dealing with bathrooms that are both inaccessible as a wheelchair user and that are difficult to navigate as someone who's trans. Um, Inaccessible meeting locations, uh, places that have um, a lot of conservative values are pretty common in Douglas County where I live. And so finding uh, ending up at a meeting location and finding out that it's just not welcoming and it's going to be a hassle to be there and to be interacting with staff and patrons is always unfortunate. Um, and yeah, people's I mean attitudes in dealing with intersecting identities is always challenging, particularly in this moment. I have had a lot of like rhetorical challenges when talking to people about transness as someone who is disabled. There's a lot of like policing and hostility when it comes to that. Um, so yeah, I think that wraps up my answer.
Thank you, Paige. Next is Jim.
Thank you for that, Paige. I would say that pride for me as a member of the kind of queer community and as somebody who has a disability is really about showing up authentically, trying to be kind of the realest, most honest version of yourself. I think achieving things and accomplishing things, no matter how big, how small, being able to step into your own power and your own identity and being happy with who you are at the end of the day when all things are said and done are is really the backbone of pride. for me. And as somebody who is queer and disabled, there is a lot of awareness going into the world of understanding that the world isn't quite built for me, that other people are having vastly different experiences than I am. An atmosphere that I might not necessarily find suitable to spend long amounts of time in. I have to just kind of be content that I've got friends or I just know members in our community who are able to take on those environments and be completely present and be completely comfortable in those environments. And I think that's really affected the way I carry myself and the way I build my days and build out planning for myself and any exciting, interesting stuff. Um, yeah, and I really think uh, being full of pride and joy really comes from a place of like self-love and learning to love love who you are even with whatever struggles you're facing, just kind of you know be present and meet yourself there. Yeah, and I'll pass it on.
Thank you, Jim. Next is Dr. Kim.
The interpreters are switching, just so you know.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Jem and Paige. I love what you guys said because I think it's spot on. One of the identities I didn't mention is that I have an autism spectrum disorder that was diagnosed as an adult and identify as autistic. And the reason I mentioned that, pride has really evolved a lot for me, and specifically around my autism. Growing up, I felt like other people with intellectual or developmental disabilities, like I didn't feel like I understood that. I didn't know how to interact with people. And I certainly never really thought of myself as having a developmental disability and being autistic, because in some ways there was a lot of shaming from my own family of my behaviors that lined up with it. And also just the idea of having a diagnosis like that follows you for the rest of your life. But more recently, within the last few years, I started meeting more IDD, intellectual developmental disabilities, that's the acronym for it, but meeting more people in the IDD community and getting more involved. And I'm on a steering committee nationally looking at developing and finding resources for people living with IDD and mental illness. And I have PTSD as well. And just I started doing work in the disability community probably 2014, 2013, something like that. And in the over 10 years I've been doing this work, the work that I've been doing with the IDD community and really embracing that as my community has been some of the most fulfilling work that I've done. And really making me realize that being able to, well, communicate. I still have communication challenges, but being able to communicate a lot of my experience as someone living with IDD um, has really helped my community in many ways, because I can understand what people are trying to say about certain topics, because I experience, for example, sensory issues that people who are not neurodiverse might not understand, but being able to try to find ways to explain that to them. Um, and for me too, I mean, pride is about recognizing challenges. I mean, I don't know about everyone else on the panel, but we often hear inspirational, you're so inspirational. And I hate it when other people tell me that, but pride for me is also recognizing we live with a lot of challenges, whether we're queer, trans, disabilities. There are a lot of challenges that we have to deal with in our lives that many other people don't. And so just being proud of that I have gone through this struggle, that my community has gone through this struggle, and that we really want to work together to improve things for others in our community and really for the world as a whole. Um, sorry, I have some notes. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think just with my own identities, being a physician, and then also being a chronic patient and accessing healthcare, um, I try to be open with some providers about all of my identities, but at the same time, there have been a lot of negative experiences I've had because of one or more of them. And so again, I guess trying not that trying to not let that hurt my sense of pride for myself and my identities, my experience, but at the same time it can also be hard. And so that's why I'm grateful, so grateful to be here with you all tonight, is I think what we can do with that and knowing what that feels like is building community, our community, not all sectioned off communities, queer, trans, crit, but we're all together. We're all dealing with multiple issues, and by recognizing that, we also have a lot of strength that we can recognize within that to affect change. So I hope I wasn't too all over the place. I'm a bit tired today, but thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Kim. And next is Maria.
So thank you everyone for your answers. And Dr. Kim, I too was diagnosed autistic at 25, and that's very much part of my answer because for me, pride means like unclenching. It means ease. It means not walking so tight in your body because everything's, kind of locked up. Growing up not knowing you're autistic when you are, means that a lot of stuff gets hidden and gets masked. Especially when you're kind of a nerdy kid who does well. People assume because school's going well, everything else is going well too. And you especially when you're socialized as a female, there's a lot of stuff you learn to keep in. We're not identified because we're allowed or do anything kind of to stand out. It's quite the opposite. And then aside from that, I'm also a closeted lesbian for most of my life. I grew up in South Texas, in a pretty devout Catholic kind of community, and so I went to Catholic university. I was going to be a nun. I was married to a man for 10 years almost. And I realized when I was coming out that I carried all this tension in my body. Like my shoulders were locked up and I felt like I couldn't breathe half the time. And I think for me it's been kind of this slow progression of pride where like when I came to be diagnosed and accepted, oh, I'm autistic, and began to feel pride for that and not, ashamed or, not kind of forced to mask all the time. There was a sort of breathing that came with that progression of having pride in myself, of having ease in my body. And then I think when I began to come out, and then ultimately, not only came out but began living authentically, it's been that process. And so that's what it means to me, and it also means having pride in the people who came before us, because I can begin to have this inner battle because people before us, were defending, our community before cops and bigots and putting their bodies in danger. And so for me, it means that too, that I get to be grateful for that.
Thank you, Maria. And we had another panelist show up, Sam. I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself, name, pronouns, title, if applicable, and how you are involved with the LGBTQIA plus community. And I will ask you the question after you finish your introduction.
Okay, my name is Sam Jarris. I am the chair of the Disability Strong Democrats, which is the state caucus for the disability community on behalf of the Democratic Party. I am part of the gay community. I am non-binary.
Okay, Sam, and same question as all other panelists. What does pride mean to you as a person who is LGBTQIA plus and living with a disability? How have these intersecting identities shaped the way you experience and engage with the world? We have 3-minute responses, and I can give you a 1-minute warning when coming close.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, everybody. I really appreciate the introduction. I thank you, Malik, for leading leading this panel for us. I understand pride to be I'm kind of a unique in my community because I grew up around a lot of Mormons, and here in Douglas County, a lot of conservatives. It required me to come out a lot later in life, which is a significant struggle. I always knew that I was autistic. well, I always knew I was socially different. I don't know if I knew I was autistic until I was 17, got an official diagnosis, but I did realize that I was same gender attracted when I was young. I just did not know how to express it. What pride means to me in that context is understanding the nuances of the variety of communities that I represent, that intersectionality, and being able to live authentically within both elements of those communities.
Thank you, Sam. All right, into the next question. Uh, can you share a moment when living as a person with a disability and identifying as LGBTQIA+ empowered you to lead, advocate, or drive change in your community? Starting with Paige.
Yeah, so this happened fairly recently. In 2023, Children's Hospital suddenly made the decision that they were not going to provide gender affirming surgery across the board. And it was just 1 week they decided that. And so, like a lot of disabled kids in Colorado, I went to Children's Hospital, growing up. And so I was like familiar. I had been treated and been getting hormones through the True Center. That's their gender identity clinic. And so I was very well established in the system. And then I just get a call from the surgery department, and they're like, we can't perform surgery. The board has made a decision, and it's effective immediately. And it was very difficult. I mean, there's an ongoing lawsuit about that, how they performed that decision and that exclusion, and I had already faced barriers because I have a medical condition, and so I had to get cleared by a different surgeon in order to be eligible for gender affirming surgery. I mean, I met with social workers. I'm a psych survivor. It's very hard to deal with like psychiatric professionals, and so I'd been making like all these monetary and social sacrifices building up to this surgery, and then they cut me. They were going to schedule a surgery date, and I get a call thinking I'm going to schedule my surgery, and it's not that. So this was very, it was just kind of an intersectional experience, being dealing with trans discrimination on the basis of being transgender within the medical establishment. And I ended up doing an interview for Colorado Public Radio that it was never aired, but I did an interview with a journalist. He like came over to my house. I went over like my notes. I showed him my medical records, and that was something that I think being a person with a disability, being born with a disability, and sort of growing up with that, it kind of emboldened me, I guess, to have that kind of transparency around medical records and around health history, that I think maybe someone who who did not have that experience would have been a little bit more private and reserved. And even though the article didn't go anywhere, I was in contact with One Colorado for a while, and a lot of organizations based on this experience and based on my ability to be open about it, because certainly a lot of people were just axed from having surgery. Oh, I should mention the irony around this. So, Children's Hospital in their press mentioned that they weren't doing surgery because they only did gender affirming
1
surgery
minute,
on
Paige.
adults.
Sorry.
Oh no, you're good. Thank you for keeping me accountable. They only did this gender affirming surgeries on adults, but they were sort of trying to walk this legal workaround by saying that they were cutting everyone from receiving care because they wanted to focus their efforts and funding on children, which of course would be great if they had provided these services 2 children.
Thank you, Paige. Next is Jim.
Thank you for sharing that hard experience, Paige. I feel like one of the first times that I was called to lead, especially at this intersection, is when I was starting my housing journey. I ended up living in a queer homeless shelter for a bit. And there I was able to kind of get more connected with my community and meet a lot of different people from a bunch of different walks of life. And then I was given the opportunity to do some work as a peer mentor at a local community center that was serving, underprivileged youth who were experiencing housing troubles, schooling troubles. And that really kind of set me on my advocacy path, especially since I had previously in college done a lot of work with the Students Disability Service Office and kind of bringing in new students and teaching them how to navigate campus and do life. So it kind of was a step in the right direction. And I ultimately ended up chair of the first Youth Action Board here in Sacramento, which was given the responsibility of selecting a number of different programs specifically meant to aid in youth homelessness and doling out about a $6 million grant to each of these programs. And I was lucky to actually get to head that team during that time period and set up a lot of those initial projects that are helping young people in this community. And I feel I was able to bring a lot of experience and expertise to the team around disability and trying to make sure that we were doing all of our work from an intersectional lens and trying to address a lot of the inequities that we ended up finding in the system, either just through personal experience interacting with the system or through conversation and storytelling from other people's interactions with the system. And ultimately, all of that led me to my current position of statewide youth organizer, where I am doing my best to organize the ILC youth staff here in California. It's going okay. You're muted.
Interpreters are switching.
Malik, I think you were muted.
You just went
okay.
off mute.
Yes,
Now you're
sorry.
off mute. Yeah.
Sorry about that. Got a little mixed up. We changed interpreters, and thank you, Jim. Now next to Dr. Kim for the question.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Paige, I just wanted to comment too. You must have been so devastated. I can't even imagine how terrible that felt. And I just think it's cruel, some of the things that are happening to trans people and trans bodies in the country right now. And it's really a really scary time. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. One experience I had a few years ago, I put on 2 workshops at the Creating Change conference when it was in Denver. And it's part of one of the national LGBT groups. I can't remember off the top of my head which one. But I did 2 separate workshops. One was on asexuality, because as I mentioned earlier, I identify as asexual. I identify too as panromantic. And so what that means is I'm basically not interested in sex, and it seems a little gross to me, but I do like dating and having romantic relationships. And so the other workshop I put on was just on disability and accessibility, not necessarily specifically for the queer community, but general considerations. I use a power wheelchair for my mobility. And so talking about wheelchair accessibility, talking about service animals, that sort of thing. And I mention this because with my workshop on being asexual, like disability really didn't factor into my discussion of that. But I showed up on my wheelchair with everything else and put on that workshop. And on the flip side, I mean, I mentioned I'm trans and asexual. I wanted to talk about accessibility in the other workshop, but again, it wasn't a focus. And I guess I use that just to mean that I think a lot of times when, for me at least, with intersectional identities, I feel pressured like I have to kind of teach everyone I see, or not necessarily I see, but that I interact with about what it's like to have both identities, or more than that, multiple identities. But we also have to remember that, I mean, we are these identities, and it's okay to really talk about one specific identity when it comes to advocating or sharing or anything. And for example, with the talk on asexuality, like to me, it didn't matter. I was in a wheelchair, and at the time, I had a lot more trouble speaking, and so I was using my iPad to talk and all of that. They were putting on a workshop about asexuality. Um, and one of the areas too where I feel it often comes up is accessing healthcare. Again, I feel like my providers want to start asking me questions sometimes about my identities and the intersectionality of them, but not necessarily in a way that's relevant to why I'm there. And so I know for myself, I have to be really careful that I'm not here. I'm not going to medical appointments. I'm not going to spirituality services. I'm not doing this so that I can tell the entire world about what it's like living with intersectional identities. And sometimes, if I go to the doctor's office, I have medical issues, I need help, and I just want to focus on that and not be having to talk about everything else at the same time. Um, and so, yeah, I think I know for myself, I have to remember that while I am very out and very open about talking about my experiences and my identities, at the same time, I don't have the energy to do that with everyone, and nor should I be expected to do that with everyone. Um, and so, yeah, I guess really just remembering that I can educate and lead in queer spaces or in disability spaces without a crossover. And that can be just as powerful as focusing on that intersection as well. And again, just remembering I need to take care of myself. I want to tell everyone because I want to help our communities with all of the many problems some of the other panelists have mentioned. But at the same time, severe fatigue is and chronic pain are some of the conditions that I deal with. And so it takes a lot of energy to do things like this as well. And if I want to be
One
able to
minute, Dr. Kim.
do things, I have to take care of myself. I have to make sure I'm getting enough rest, and I have to respect my own boundaries around all of that. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Kim. Maria next.
Yeah, so I mean, in the past decade that I've worked with, CCC for the past 5 years, and before that, just general advocacy, most of my involvement has been at the intersection of being disabled and Latina or an immigrant, and so that had been most of it. And that in itself exposed some of the harsher truths about being disabled, brown and queer, going to work in the communities in Eagle, for instance, and seeing, these more rural communities and seeing kids who are queer, for instance, who are part of these three groups, especially in areas that are not, a big city. It's hard. I mean, it's difficult everywhere. And I mean, I also, before I proceed, gosh, Paige, like I am so sorry about that. And it's, I will touch a little bit on how that kind of stuff's kind of built to my ultimate response. So, I had a little bit of that exposure where like my queer identities played some, but not as much in my disability work. And I actually kind of shut down for like 6 months. I was finishing boot camp, and I think just mentally, like in terms of advocacy, since a certain day in November, I just kind of wanted to go under my covers and cry. Um, and I've kind of been there, kind of ignoring what is going on in the world as much as I can with little things here and there. But it builds up, and you keep hearing stories like that, and I hear so much language and rhetoric that is exactly like the kind of stuff I grew up with in South Texas, the kind of stuff that kept me closeted and all of that stuff, the kind of stuff that, rejected and treated trans people horribly. I've heard my best friend who's child is trans, and they're my little phoenix, and like the fear that they'll start hormones and then not be able to get them. And so I'm it's that this is the moment. I think that I kind of have that drive. I don't know how, because I have two kids. I'm tired, you know but I'm pretty all right at data, and I'm pretty all right at talking to people. And so there's that kind of defining moment, I think, that maybe a lot of us are going through right now, after, things have settled down, that this is actually what's going on and not a nightmare, that we have to somehow get activated. So that's kind of what I'm working on. I'm figuring out how exactly that's going to look like, because the way that things are headed, I don't ever want to be like an alarmist or anything like that, but we are already seeing the effects of, where our communities stand. And for our communities who have so many identities that are under attack right now, it just seems like we're walking around with targets in our back, especially trans folks. And so, I think in some ways that's going to be part of like how we mostly get involved, because we round up against, we round up in favor of, I think, who's most at risk. And we up and fight. So I kind of feel like that might be one of the areas that, we might be supposed to be gathering around, with greater force.
Thank you, Maria. Now, Sam.
Thank you. It's been challenging for me to identify ways that I can be more effective as an intersectional community organizer. Unlike a lot of people in this call, my identity really does only cross, two intersections, and I don't feel like maybe perhaps this is my own level of imposter syndrome, but I don't feel like my own level of experience lives up to what the level of authenticity or the responsibility that I should be taking to look out for our community. That said, there was a point in time in my life where, as a person with both the inflammatory juvenile arthritis, so I experience severe joint pain and have since childhood, and I'm autistic, and I have a rare genetic disorder that only 50,000 people on the planet have. But that aside, there was a point where I felt that I was not seeing the intersection of advocacy work for the disability community that other communities are saying for themselves. And that's not to say there's an indictment of anybody in our own community, but we experience a lot of infantilization, if you will, of other people wanting to do the work for us and not inviting us to contribute. And my realization is nobody was going to understand the desire or the fire that we really needed to create for ourselves to advocate for our own community. And there was a point in my life where, I realized that if I wasn't going to do the work myself, nobody was going to do it for me, and I would either have to completely resign myself to living in a society that would never care about me, or I'd have to make them care about me. And that's the kind of the point where I made the decision that I would start writing policy. I would start advocating for the disability community. I come from I come from a family who have been involved in community organizing for generations, so it was kind of a no-brainer for me. The struggle continues to be my own energy, my own ability to, excuse me, spend the, deal with fatigue that is associated with my IJA, deal with the challenges associated with, 11 related related knee surgeries and other surgeries. So it's been being able to being able to authentically, advocate, but then also being able to set boundaries that effectively allow me to not exert myself to a degree beyond what I feel comfortable doing. Becoming the chair of the Disability Strong Democrats has been certainly a privilege, but I know there's a lot of hard work to be done. I am surrounded by a lot of other autistics within the democratic policy space that I'm really excited to continue to work with, and that's kind of one of the things that continues to drive me to do what I continue to do.
Thank you, Sam. So I want to open with, you all had actually answered our third question, which was, what are some barriers you've faced in queer spaces as a disabled person? And what does true inclusion look like to you? So thank you for that. So we're actually just going to go straight ahead to our last question. And since we have 5 panelists, I would like 2 minutes per for this response. And that question would be, what message or wisdom would you share with younger queer disabled people who are still finding their voice or place in this world? Can we please start with Paige?
Okay. Yeah, I think the first thing that's always on my mind is to get comfortable with healthcare reform. This is kind of a thing that mainstream white disability organizers and able-bodied gay people have sort of just neglected. And it's to the detriment of the healthcare system, honestly, and of like not just the dominant for-profit hospitals, but also our own like intercommunal resources are sort of stunted, and I like the ongoing work to get that changed. I'll also say that something I've noticed among people who are my age or younger is there is a um, tendency to take the social model, in my opinion, too far, um, and kind of reject any notion of treatment or cure in a broad sense. And there are nuances. Some people do desire alleviating their symptoms. Some people would like a cure. And that there's no natural body. This is something I get as someone who chose to medically transition, is that there's no like default body. What I'm doing is not a modification to a natural state. And if there was a natural state, there can't be, because we enforce it through intersex surgeries and through coercion on that front. And so that's there's that sort of, I don't know, just kind of a thought experiment to wrap your head around. But there's also opportunities for active prevention, of reactionary conservative backlash and movements, not just this like reaction that we're sort of dealing with. Case in point, I guess, is Texas versus Becerra, which originated because the well, Texas, as it's named in the lawsuit, I guess, meant to sue the Health and Human Services, the Department of Health and Human Services, because their new guidelines around Section 504 of the 1973 Rehabilitation Act aimed at naming gender dysphoria as a condition deserving of accommodation. And this enraged conservatives, who latched onto this as a way to push towards discrediting this particular edit to Section 504, which was established in 2024. But then also there were fears among the disability community that it might be a step in claiming that Section 504 was unconstitutional as a whole act. And so that was really scary. But honestly, as a trans person with a disability, I do feel like that could have been a bit more, like we could have been more prepared for that. Frankly, we could have had
30 seconds, Paige.
trainings.
Sorry.
Oh, thank you. We could have had trainings. We could have had intracommunal discussions between queer people and between the IL movement, between the protection and advocacy organizations, to sort of address the gaps in legal knowledge. between what the attacks on trans people are and what the attacks on the ADA and attacks on the disability community are. And so, there's the apparatus, the oppressive apparatus that we have is intersectional. It harms the most marginalized people first and foremost, but everyone else gets, these like ricocheting impacts. And if we have like one protective system crumbling and sort of falling and having cracks, there will be a foundation of oppression to support our demise. And so we really have to be mindful about being rightfully targeting these intersectional identities.
Thank you, Paige. Jem?
Thank you, Paige. If I had to give any advice, I would say fight back. And I don't mean that physically, I mean linguistically. When you're hearing these insane conversations and these insane arguments, take the time to poke holes in them and don't be afraid to get creative about changing how the conversation is going and looking for patterns in what people are saying. Because a lot of this conservative backlash is rooted in almost completely insane fears. Right? There's this fear that we're disrupting some sort of natural state. Humanity's been doing that for years. We haven't really given a shit yet, but we're to start drawing the line now. And a lot of these arguments fall apart once you provide an actual logistic observation. And I think a really good example is, the trans people in restrooms thing, right? These laws are being passed radically, very quickly, but they don't have solvency. They're not trying to solve the thing that they say they want to solve, which is we don't want men in the women's restroom. Okay, well, now you've forced trans men into the women's restroom. Uh-oh, we've suddenly created the exact problem we wanted to avoid. And I think there's a lot of work that's being missed on a lot of different stages and a lot of different platforms, both, colloquially around just people in general, but also at an systems admin level where a lot of these conversations come up and we are not poking the holes that we need to in these cases and in these arguments. Another great example is that combination of the ADA modification, where the ADA is saying trans dysphoria is a disability and it deserves to be accommodated. And the Republican establishment has spoken ad nauseum about how they view transness as a mental illness and things like this, but they won't speak about what they want to do about it, because what they want to do about it is highly illegal. And I think using our voices, using our stories, and using our narratives and reminding people that I deserve a happy life just as much as you do is one of the most powerful things and one of the most simple acts of rebellion that you can do. And remembering that if you're disabled, like your community is in all communities, right? The disabled community does not get to select, handpick race, gender, anything. Everyone's going to be here. When you show up to this disabled community, you're going to see everybody of all different religions, races, everything. And so the disabled community is one of the best posed communities to tackle intersectional issues and actually have the time to talk about these issues. And the very last thing, especially for people who are living in those religious states and things like that, is to push back, push back on religion, right? A lot of these people are talking about, stakes that are beyond the mortal plane. And forcing those conversations to come back down to earth and remind people, you know what? I'm kind of worried about the 70 years I got on this rock, and I'll worry about what happens after when we get there. That's also incredibly powerful. Cutting those conversations down to, you know what? Maybe it's some people's choice to go to hell, and maybe that you have to respect that. Maybe that's part of your religion. Maybe you need to learn to love people for the choices that they're going to make, even if you disagree with them. And don't this is no longer the era of agree to disagree. That's not an option. We are having conversations about human rights. We are having conversations about who we are going to help, who are we are going to save, who are we going to provide medical care to. And that is not a time to find a place to agree to disagree. Human rights is not an issue that we can agree to disagree on. And if you're working for a disability organization and they're saying, well, trans issues aren't our issues, they're wrong. If you work for a disability rights organization, you work for a human rights organization, and that is your first and foremost duty. And if you get the chance to engage with your political leaders, give them hell. Tell them, speak the truth, speak your honest, authentic experience, and remind them that it is our time, our money, and our lives that we are putting in these people's hands. And if they want to play around and toy with those, then we'll play around and toy with those careers. I'll see you backseat. I'll see you in an Uber next year when you're fired. But that's kind of it. Godspeed, everyone.
Thank you, Jim. We still have 5 minutes of the panel, so I'm very sorry, Dr. Kim, Maria, and Sam, but can we be a bit quicker with the responses? I am very sorry. Can we start with Dr. Kim?
Yeah, sure. Jem, my personal favorite is you don't want dudes and dresses in the military, but that's what you're doing to trans masculine people in the military as well. So, but just quickly, it's so scary right now, some of the things that are happening. It really is. And I think what we all need to do is find community, find the community where we feel loved and accepted for who we are and empowered for who we are. And if you can't find one, create one, make one where there really is that love. Because I mean, it sounds kind of wishy-washy, but we really do need more love. And then I just want to say too, with acceptance, the other side of acceptance is we have to accept everybody. We might be radically different ideas from what they do, but we have to accept this person, this is where they're at right now, and not necessarily always be trying to fight to change, but just welcoming them and opening that conversation, that dialogue that's disappeared, where we've become such factionated groups. It's hard to have conversations with people who think differently, but we really do need to accept people and come back together again to really start working on these issues. And again, what you're saying, Jem, it's not about compromising. I mean, human rights are human rights and we deserve it. But at the same time, if we keep pushing people away, that's never going to happen. And I know it's really hard when it's this scary and this scary of an environment, but it's something we all need to work towards. And so again, I love all of you, and I'm just so grateful to be working with you on this fight and to be here with you all this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Kim. Maria?
Okay, I mean, just piggybacking off, the last few speakers. The power is in the community. The power is with the people. And if you're here, you probably want to get involved, right? And I think this is a great place to start. Support those places, those organizations that support community organizing movements that really take people seriously, first of all. And second of all, look out for internal division. That's something that keeps happening with, we get brown against black folks because apparently we're competing for jobs, but, that's not the case. That's what they want to do. They want to divide us. We have J.K. Rowling and, all these awful turfs. And I'm still to meet one lesbian who's afraid of trans people. So, I mean, these are all lies. We're a part of a lot of wonderful communities. And sometimes when we join one community, their voice will try to simplify your identity to one thing. And it's not that. You're complicated and beautiful and 23 original flavors. And, we need to bring those together and not to let that crap divide us. And so, don't let that shit get in between. And also just, it's with the people. Like, whatever happens, like that, what we have going for us is that, the fact that there's more of us. And, so find your favorite organization and, get out there and get some house meetings going. I'll join you.
Thank you, Maria. And last but not least, Sam, please.
Okay, I'll be very quick about this. I agree with everything everybody else has said. I am doubled over with. I'm just feeling the vibes here, and it's been awesome. And I'm grateful, and I want to follow all of you everywhere because I am feeling really connected to a group of wonderful human beings who see the world very similar to me, and it's not something I find in very many spaces. So thank you. But I want to add that we aren't Maria's right. We're not fighting against each other. We're fighting against the billionaires. Like, let's be really crystal clear about this. We're fighting for our human rights, and that means taking down the billionaires and making sure those people with don't need another yacht. We deserve accessible housing. We deserve fair treatment. We deserve a job that pays a living wage. All of these very basic human rights, and we're not going to get those if we sow division in our own communities and don't work with each other to lift each other up fundamentally. So thank you everybody for this. This has been fabulous.
Thank you, Sam. And with that, all of our questions are over. Sadly, we are running really short on time, so we may have to skip Q&A. I greatly apologize for that. So just as a starting point, this was an incredible conversation tonight. I want to say thank you to Jim, Paige, Dr. Kim, Sam, and Maria for participating with us and bringing their wisdom, vulnerability, and power. And thank you all to everyone who joined us tonight and are watching. So I'm going to real quick remove the spotlight from everyone except myself.
Boo!
We have a closing message to share. If you want this, this is the end of webinar slide. As you heard, pretty much we are continuing in two ways. You can either become a member of CCDC. Membership is free, and it's one of the most powerful ways to stand with the disability community. Members receive updates on advocacy efforts, opportunities to take action, and invitations to future panels like this one. So if you want to become a member, please scan the QR code on the left. But if you want to also keep showing up, our next panel is Our Future, Our Fight. Youth with Disabilities Speak Out. It will be on June 26th, 2025 from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. As the same with this panel, ASL and Spanish interpretation are included. And also June 26th is my birthday, so this is going to be a very fun panel for me. So be on the lookout for registration information in the future. You can register for the event on the right. And from there, we are unstoppable. And when we move together, when we honor each other's stories, and when we commit to building a future where everyone rises, we are stronger. Thank you again for being here. Stay steadfast, stay rising, and stay unstoppable together. Thank you, and have a great night.